It's just, it's stuff I wish I can't get into details because it'd be like, well, you're exposing a TTP. But it's like, whereas someone else would be like, well, I guess that bad guy's in that room. We got to go through that door. Do you?
The last thing that you want to do is end up in the room with somebody who has a gun face to face with that person. I think at this point, most people can agree with that. It's my responsibility, as I see it on this channel or in general, to provide you guys as much information as I can to either make you believers in the things that I say and I talk about by providing you with at least some level of evidence, or providing you with enough information that validates the way that you think about tactics. This is former retired Navy SEAL Bradley Geary, and I'm going to read a little bit of information on him that I got off of Grok, so if it's incorrect, you can let me know in the comments. But it does say that he served with Devgru, officially known as Special Warfare Development Group, during his career as a Navy SEAL. Specifically, he held leadership roles at Naval Special Warfare Tactical Development and Evaluation Squadron 3, which is associated with Devgru, focusing on the development and evaluation of tactics, techniques, and equipment for SEAL operations. His service included high-level assignments, typically of Devgru's specialized and elite operations. Kind of the entire purpose or premise of this video is just to provide you guys with some of the things that I've been saying for a while on this channel, I guess you could say being validated by guys who have the highest level of training. Because unfortunately, some people refuse to look at the information and at the evidence that's being provided and instead focus on who is providing that information in order to agree or disagree with a way of doing things.
You know, or are there other solutions? You know, what are some other options we might have? Let's take a tactical pause. Let's take a knee outside the target. We got all the time in the world right now. Let's solve this problem. Do we have a dog? Do we have robotics? Do we have demo? What do we have? What other tools do we have that we can maneuver against this and not get forced ourselves into this like fatal funnel of going through the door and getting shot at, where you know that enemy is going to pretty much hit who he shoots at.
This is the part around CQB and problem solving around structures that doesn't get enough attention, probably because it's not associated with what most people consider to be CQB and the thing on the internet that gets the most likes, shares, whatever. It makes people excited, which is guys in full kit moving around a structure as quickly as possible, calling that violence of action, and then telling people that this is your best and only way to solve every single problem. He's saying, hey, we have all the time in the world right now. Do we need to go in this room if there's a guy in there with a gun, or do we have other options available to us? Do we have a drone? Do we have robots? Do we have a dog? Right? These are options that may be available to SWAT teams, probably not available to most individual cops. And even if you're on a SWAT team, just because you have these capabilities doesn't necessarily mean you're legally that you can use these capabilities, right? Or maybe your policy says that you can't use them only under certain conditions. And so just because you have two different ends of the spectrum, which is one, hey, let's take our time and let's figure out what options we have to solve this problem, and the other end of the spectrum being, hey, let's get in a stack and let's move through this structure as quickly as possible. That doesn't mean that you have to default all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is everybody just dump into this room. There are things that you could utilize as techniques, and I can't give you what those are because I'm not there in the moment. I don't know what the structure looks like, and I don't know who the people are that are doing this, what capabilities they actually have to give you guidance on exactly what those things are. But it may be as simple as, hey, we have two opposing threats at the end of the hallway, and we have two rifle-rated shields. So let's get those two rifle-rated shields up here, and let's pin left and go right, right? That's probably going to give you your best chances at survival in that particular instance.
So that is what blew my mind the most, was just, and it never ceased to amaze me.
It's experience that does that, right?
It really is.
I remember back in 2004, if there was a bad guy in the room, they're blowing the door, they're going in the room and getting in a gunfight. But then after a few years, it was like, why don't we just call them out? Call out
and that became, right. And that became a tactic.
Remember, I showed you guys from the Modern Tactical Shooting YouTube channel, former Special Forces operator told us the story. I relayed it to you guys that back in 2004, they had 24 Special Forces operators go up against 3 determined fighters, and their tactic at the time was dumping into the room. They lost 2 Special Forces operators doing that and changed their tactic to now stepping center before going into the room. It blows my mind that there's still organizations out there who are against stepping center, and I'm about to provide you with another story to kind of validate why that's probably a good idea. And there's still people and organizations out there who are against stepping center and refuse to acknowledge the loss of life and how they reconcile at least that event and continuing to still teach that methodology.
Right. They're like, and it's funny because in war, it's so high stress. It's so intense. These novel ideas, which sometimes like some guy will think of something and everyone looks around like, how come we didn't think of that sooner?
Exactly.
Like we've been doing this for a long time. It's hard to put yourself in the shoes of a warfighter and realize that, hey man, when bullets are flying, like, your brain doesn't have a lot of free space to go through creative thought processes here. It's very
it's a lizard brain.
It really
Whatever
is.
you input it in your limbic system in training, it's going to happen.
That's right. You default to let me get on my gun and run toward that. And so the discipline and the maturity to do I have to run in there right now or can we wait a few minutes? What's my decision space right now? That's what blew me away. And that only comes with maturity. It only comes with experience. And it comes with, unfortunately, a lot of Purple Hearts.
I think it's a good point to say that we don't necessarily have to wait until somebody gets hurt or killed before we change the way that we do things. And in fact, we should be forward thinking and instead of waiting for that to happen, analyzing what we're doing and making adjustments before somebody actually gets hurt or killed.
Because that's how we learn these things in war. Like, why did we do it that way? That dude didn't have to get shot up. We could have done it this way and that wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. Let's start doing it that way, or at least try it, see what happens. So I saw with them a very a willingness to experiment on the battlefield, which was fun. And it's fun to be a part of. And you see a very quick evolution. But you said experience. It's not just experience. It's experience coupled with autonomy. It's dudes feeling like they have the autonomy to try that.
Which is very unique at that command.
Very unique.
You will be the best tactician that you can be if you have the ability to analyze new information and if that new information is in conflict with the information you already have from the perspective of, hey, maybe this new information is creating a safer, more efficient, and more effective way of doing things than changing the way that you've always done these things. I would be weary when you hear people speak things into or out of existence, speak into or out of existence ideas that they only provide in theory explanations for. For example, if you have on one side a team dumping into a room and you have on the other side, and this is just drawing it up on a whiteboard, a team stepping center before going into the room, and you ask somebody why they believe dumping into the room is safer, they just say, well, because in this case you have violence of action, and in this case you don't. And then the problem becomes, well, explain to me why it's better, and not just explain it, show it to us and demonstrate it to us, why it's better to dump into the corners first while disregarding the majority of the room, and in doing so, turning our side plates, which is the most vulnerable part of our body armor, to where a threat could be, instead of taking up more of the room from the outside first and then dumping into those corners. And when people provide, in theory, explanations like, well, it's just violence of action, that should tell you that they're going to have a hard time explaining their perspective. Because in that particular case, if you draw those two separate ideas on a whiteboard and have them draw it for you, most people would look at that and go, well, where is violence of action? I don't see it. How is that helping us make sense of angles, helping us make sense of control, helping us make sense of providing more of our body armor to where the threat potentially is first, and potentially seeing where the threat is before dumping into the corners, right? They won't do these things. They won't even draw it up on a whiteboard because most people will be able to identify what makes sense and what doesn't.
They breached and entered the structure, began clearing rooms. They got to a room, door was closed, they kicked the door, and both began to feed through. And the way that you clear a room is one guy goes one way, one guy that's behind him goes the opposite, and it just does that throughout however many people are in the stack. Well, they breached this door. There was a stack of mattresses on the floor, and there was a guy behind him with an AK, full auto. Put the weapon up over the mattresses and just hammered it right at the door, which we called the fatal funnel. Like, you got to clear the door because that's where the enemy's guns are naturally drawn to where you're going to be entering that room. And as they came in, one went left, one went right, and they were both hit by the AK fire and about the side right there. one guy on one side, one guy on the other. A saw gunner came in behind them and eliminated the threat behind the mattresses. There was a radio call that came out that we have eagles down, and one of them said, "I'm hit and I can't move."
This is a former Ranger talking about hitting an objective in Iraq, and I believe this was in 2003, which would have been before the 3rd Special Forces Group lost 2 individuals dumping into a room and then stepping center. And the question becomes, right, just like this former Navy SEAL is talking about, is that our only option? And in some cases it might be, right? It might be your only option. It might be your best only option. But if you're dumping into a room into the corners first, you're exposing the weakest part of your body armor, right? They always say, try to keep your body armor squared up towards the threat because we have least coverage on our sides. And that's where these 2 Rangers are hit. And unfortunately, they're killed. Now, in this particular incident, there's kind of another factor playing into how this could have been more catastrophic, and that's a saw gunner entering the room and being the one who has to take care of the threat. I carried a saw for 2 years in the Marine Corps, and they always told us, and I was taught, you know, well, one, a saw never enters the room first, but also a saw never is the individual, or saw gunner is never the individual who starts an ambush, and that's because saws are prone to malfunctioning. They're prone to going to let off a round, that bolt slamming forward and nothing happening, right? It's not necessarily something that I experience often, but it does happen. And so in this particular case, not only do you have 2 guys going down, making entry, I guess, you know, doing, I would just call like the old school method of dumping into the room, but now you have this other factor of a saw gunner coming into the room and having to be the one to take care of the problem. And in this case, you know, he was able to do that without issue. My understanding of this video is that this is an active duty Delta guy talking to Forward Observations Group before they go into Ukraine. So maybe the video is a couple years old, and he's going to talk about using the threshold to your advantage.
If you guys can get it, like, you know that they have it, right? And that's something that, like, a lot of people, it fucked us up the first couple runs. And that's where it is huge to, one, get your SOPs, know how you do things, and take your time pieing. Because if you do go into, even if they just got PV-14s, like, they can see your silhouette. Like, don't expose yourself if you don't have to. And
take your time pieing. Don't expose your silhouette if you don't have to. If they have nods, they can see your silhouette. So does this mean if it's daytime, then fully expose yourself and go into the room? Or does this mean take your time pieing and don't expose yourself if you don't have to?
Shy away. This is one of those things where the more you guys hash it out, it's weird because when the pie thing became famous, this is like how they taught it to people. And you're clearing the whole room. Me and him from right here, all I have to do is this, and he does the same thing, and we can see the whole room. Try and fight the urge of doing this, because then you're starting to get in his line of fire. So you really can't engage, especially with these thick walls, anything right here. He potentially could, but not if the person that's pieing is in his line. And so that's why the wall is your friend. That's your reference point. If you feel yourself slipping away from the wall, you're like, can you stay here? Because from right here.
In this particular case, he's talking about if you have cross coverage outside the room, looking inside the room, there's no need to continue to work that angle because your buddy who's on the other side of the threshold is already looking at that angle. So fight the urge to chase angles in this situation. What would his opinion be if, you know, you couldn't get set up cross coverage on the room? Well, I'd imagine it probably wouldn't be, well, hey, since you can't get set up crisscross on the room, abandon the threshold idea entirely and just stack up and now go into the room. I doubt it would be that. I doubt it, or I believe that it would probably be continue to use as much of the threshold as you can and don't expose yourself if you don't have to.
I'm not going however I am there and there. That's all I have to do. Stop at 12 o'clock because he's going to have the rest of it and it's going to sing. We don't want to poke all the way out if we don't have to. Does that make sense?
And so we probably see this reflective in some of Forward Observation Group's videos on YouTube, where not every video is just them dumping into the room, but them actually using the threshold. And one of the common things that people bring up when you start providing this type of evidence to people is like, hey, it's not just me. There's guys at the top level who are talking about the same things, is, oh, well, that's because over there, those thresholds are concrete. It's like, you don't know, right? I mean, yeah, sure, a lot of those buildings are, but when we're utilizing thresholds or using what we have to use to our advantage in that moment, we're not analyzing exactly what the structure is made out of. Is it just drywall? I've provided you guys, or will provide you guys with enough information to show you that it's not just drywall all the time, right? People get this idea when they say drywall won't protect you, that you're considering a thin sheet of sheetrock the thing that's supposed to save you or stop the bullets. Obviously, we know that isn't going to do that, but sometimes there's several layers of things, right? Maybe there's a dresser inside the room and we have a number of different 2x4s and electrical and all these things between us and where the potential threat is. Or maybe we can position ourselves before we actually open this door to at a point where we are not directly outside the threshold at all, but maybe 10 or 15 feet back from the threshold. And so when that shooting starts, we're now giving that round even more layers to try to deviate before it gets to us. If you look at incidents inside of structures with police officers, either the officers shooting through the drywall at the suspects or the suspects shooting at officers through the drywall, where do you think the suspect is more likely to hit, or the officers are more likely to hit? The person that they can fully see who's inside the room, or the person that they're blindly trying to see through drywall that they can't see outside the room? And the answer is obvious, right? There's an incident that I posted recently where officers shot 58 rounds at a suspect who was inside a closet and didn't hit him one time. The suspect shot 14 rounds at the officers, through the drywall, and there was one minor injury that I don't even think was, actually being hit by gunfire, but rather fragmentation or some other injury. And that's just one incident. And there's many incidents like that where these rounds are entering inside of structures and going somewhere other than hitting the actual person. So this idea that you're safer inside the room because, again, an in theory concept of, well, just violence of action, that's the thing that's going to, get the job done in the most efficient manner, isn't something that I necessarily buy into all the time. It can be something that you have to use in a particular moment because it's all you have and you have to go now.